Hi, and welcome to Marketing Mondays with Maria, a podcast for marketing leaders. I am your host, Maria, and my guest today is Vincent Pierri. He's a public speaking coach who has worked with marketing leaders like Ari and Daniel Murray from Marketing Millennials, Nick Brokema, and many, many more. And I'm really happy to get to ask him a few questions today about public speaking, a very scary topic, I would say, to most people, and also about getting over the fear of public speaking, delivering powerful talks, even if you're preparing for your first ever public speaking gig. So, Vincent, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here. Great to get to know you a little bit. And yeah, I'm excited for the conversation.
Could you maybe tell us a little bit about how you came to helping people with public speaking? What is your connection to it?
Yes, absolutely. So my origin story is a little windy and a lot of people don't know it, but I have a day job still, and it is actually a little surprising. I am a pastor of a church in the United States. So for my job, I do all sorts of speaking, obviously, all the time. That is, in a lot of ways, the biggest part of the job. So I have to write a different talk every single week, delivered to the same group of people. Sometimes for some pastors, if their church is a little smaller, this is going to maybe sound kind of rude to pastors, but if their church is a little smaller, they know everybody personally, and so the expectations are a little lower for communication. It's kind of like you're talking to a group of friends. The church I pastor is bigger, and so I don't know hardly any of the people who show up every week. So basically, the expectation is very high because it's a large group of people and it's the same group of people. So you can't just give the same talk over and over and over again, which is like what some, public speaking people do who are professional public speakers, which is what they should be doing. So that is a real pressure cooker of content creation. And I've been doing it for years. So I have to do this every single week. So I had no, expectations of becoming a coach, especially a coach for people in the tech industry. But my brother also used to be a pastor. He got into the tech industry. He does like marketing consulting now. And he was like, you should just do some kind of side hustle in the tech world. And he kept badgering me about it, bothering me about it. Any sort of nonprofit job, there's certain financial limitations that come along with it, right? Pastors included. So I just started learning about the tech industry. No real destination in mind. Wasn't thinking of doing public speaking coaching. Was just thinking, how could I come alongside some tech people and find a way to add value? So the way I started learning about the tech industry was just by watching podcasts, reading some books, and watching tech conferences. And as I was watching all these tech conferences with tech leaders talking about what they did, I thought, wow, they are having a very difficult time communicating. Even at some of the biggest conferences with the biggest stages, biggest names, thousands of people there, they're obviously nervous, struggling. The talks are confusing. And then it came to me, oh, why would they know how to do it? If you're a CEO of a large company, you have maybe a couple all hands talks a year you're doing, but a lot of the time there's really no need to do any sort of public speaking. And so they just never build the muscle, and it just is what it is. So that's what gave me the idea. Maybe I could help tech leaders with communication. And so I just started posting on LinkedIn. My brother's also very big on LinkedIn, Anthony Pierri. Some people know him. So I think him liking my posts helped get me into the algorithm. But there has turned out to be a very large need. And I've gotten a lot of traction in terms of connecting with people and people looking for a coach. So yeah, it started really 6 or 7 months ago, but it's a lot of demand and a lot of people reaching out. So it's been a blast.
We do need your help. I also go to conferences and I hear, just like some talks are not as engaging as it could be. And the subject matter is super interesting. And that's not something you practice at all. Who are your clients typically, like nowadays?
It's been a fair amount of like tech people, especially people that have a LinkedIn presence. I think LinkedIn people just tend to find LinkedIn people, right? So that's been a good bit, is like LinkedIn creators who are in the tech niche. And then a lot of just CEOs, founders, C-suites, or even just directors who are giving talks, generally tech background. So yeah, mostly tech people and some sort of LinkedIn creators, and almost exclusively conference talks. That's really my focus, is that. So there's like internal presentation coaching. I don't really do a lot of that. It's really for conferences.
And I'm curious because you have, this history with public speaking. Were you always comfortable with public speaking yourself, or did you have to also kind of develop your skills step by step?
I was very not comfortable with it. Not even a little bit. I started actually as like a church musician. So there's a job in churches called a worship leader, where you lead the band. There's like modern churches where there's a band, there's drums, there's all that. I had been a musician forever, started doing the church musician thing. I never spoke except like, good morning, everybody. Let's sing these songs together. That was it. And someone asked me at some point to speak, and I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't want to do it. I'm freaking out to do it. But I said yes for whatever reason. And I remember the night before, I slept 2.5 hours because I was panicking. Yeah. And I remember I took like sleeping pills. I think I had a shot of bourbon. Nothing, nothing could get me to sleep. And I was terrified. And I was terrified for a long time. Once I started doing it regularly, probably the first 2 years of doing it weekly, I was nervous before every single rep. So I really had a lot of work I had to do. I would say I'm naturally a very average communicator, but if you have to do it constantly, you just kind of, you get as good as you can get pretty quickly. There's a lot of things it took me 2 years to figure out that if I could have figured it out at the beginning, the nerves would have gone away a lot faster.
Why do you think people struggle with public speaking, and what are like the main, I guess, blockers or concerns that your clients share with you when they contact you also to work together?
So this is where I'll start to get into something we'll probably talk about a few different times in this conversation. But my whole thing that I discovered for myself and that I teach clients now is that almost all confidence problems are actually content problems. So for you, Maria, let's say somebody asked you to walk up on stage and read off of a piece of paper. All you had to do is read it. How nervous would you be? Probably not a lot, right?
Not
You a tell me.
lot. No, not a lot. I would say like a 2 out of 10.
Right, especially compared to if you're giving a talk,
Yeah.
like for what you were telling me before we got on, like you do Notion presentations for Notion. Reading a piece of paper versus giving a talk, as the speaker, totally different. What that tells me, or what that sort of is an example of, is that most people's stage fright has almost nothing to do with being on stage. People's natural amount of stage fright is a 2 out of 10. What the actual fear is this a good talk, and do I remember it?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does.
People think they're worried to be on stage. Almost none of them are actually worried to be on stage. They're worried to be on stage and give a talk that they don't know if it's any good, and they can't remember how it all fits together and how it all works together. What I have found coaching in my own journey and coaching people is that if you learn to write great public speaking content, which is different than LinkedIn content, it's different than blog content. If you learn to write great public speaking content, you can get over being nervous so fast. If you learn how to put a talk together that is engaging and powerful and addresses people's pain points, and it's clear in your own mind, you can get up there very confident very quickly.
To me, it makes total sense because those are also the questions I'm asking myself, or the fears I have before giving a presentation. One fun question for you: what is the most common piece of bad advice you hear about public speaking?
Yes, right. Okay, so flip side to this. Let's imagine you were a singer. Let's say you were in need of some voice lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Could not hit the notes very well, shaky voice, you just had to work on singing. If someone throws you on stage and says, "Okay, we are going to, like, you're preparing to sing," and they're like, "We're going to plan out when you're going to move your hands, and we're going to plan out where you're going to walk during the song, and we're going to plan out every facial expression you're going to make, and we're going to plan out every little thing like that, and we're going to say, here's what to do with your hands, here's not what to do with your hands." If you are not sure if you're going to hit the notes, now you're going to crumble. Because if you're just trying to deliver on the actual singing, and then on top of that, you add all of these performance things, it only makes you more nervous, and it only makes you a worse singer and a more awkward performer. Most of the public speaking advice, especially on LinkedIn, and some of my friends on LinkedIn do this, and I'm always trying to walk the line of not just blasting them, but if you are talking to new communicators and you start giving them advanced delivery nuances and techniques, you are literally destroying their confidence. Like, if you are nervous to get on stage, you don't really understand your talk, you're just trying to make sure you get through your points. And then on top of that, you're trying to plan, what should I do with my hands? What should I not do with my hands? When am I going to walk to which part of the stage? How do I want my facial expressions to be? You get so in performance mode, and you're like splitting your attention between the content and then all these weird delivery things that half the time make you more awkward to begin with, because they're kind of theatrical and like performance based, but you're just trying to give a talk, let alone trying to do all these like weird things with your body. So most public speaking advice online is about delivery. And I push my clients so hard, you need to forget all of that. You need to literally remove everything you've ever thought about when it comes to delivery out of your mind, and just focus on the talk and focus on connecting with the people and just talking right to them. That makes sense?
Yeah, totally. Get the basics first and ignore all of the noise, because there's also so much input you can get. I also have made this mistake where you go online and you're like, public speaking tips, and then you find a TED Talk, and then you watch the TED Talk, but it's like one day before your presentation, and you're like, I have to do this with my hands, and I have to do this.
Oh, yes. 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 And it's insane. It is literally insane. A lot of that comes from the fact that a lot of people giving public speaking advice are professional public speakers.
Yeah.
Professional public speakers write 1 or 2 talks per year and deliver them again and again and again and again and again. If you're giving the same talk 30 times, you start to pay attention to your hands. You start to pay attention to where you walk, because you're not thinking about the content at all. You've done the content 30 times. So they develop all these very advanced and nuanced delivery techniques, and they forget that that's not what they were thinking about when they first started speaking. And so they start pushing it all online, and they're like, oh, do all these things because that's what they're working on. But it's not what beginners should be working on, and it literally destroys beginner communicators. So there's like a lot of it's hard because public speaking is not a science. You can't like prove these things. So there's just when there's no way to prove or disprove best practices, and you are so afraid, it is so easy for people to get moved in the wrong direction, because fear is everyone, when you're afraid, you're like, how do I fix this? And so you just grab onto whatever first thing you see. I've literally seen people like big accounts, big LinkedIn accounts being like, listen to 120 BPM music to make sure you're speaking at the right rate. I'm like, that is not helping anyone.
Oh, that makes me stressed hearing this.
I know, like you can't think about the rate of words per sentences in your first like 40 talks. Like that's so advanced. So I'm all about content. Write a talk that makes sense and deliver it.
Then connected to that also, what is to you a good, like quote unquote, good talk, good presentation, good conference talk? What is it to you?
Great question. Let me ask you a question on that, and then I'll answer.
Of course.
What's the last talk you remember hearing that you liked, that you enjoyed it?
Let me think about it. Actually, Nick Brokima's talk about LinkedIn and writing good LinkedIn content and growing on LinkedIn was really good. He just seemed very confident. His slides were supporting what he was saying. He cracked a few jokes. I kind of left feeling inspired to take action. And I think that is also what you hopefully want to achieve when you're giving a presentation, that everyone feels inspired and connected and wants to learn more and take action. So I think that was a really good one.
Yeah, I love that. I feel a little biased right now because I coached Nick on that talk. So Nick did that talk on building a LinkedIn audience, essentially like building a business on LinkedIn. Is that something you're thinking about doing?
That's what I'm in the process of doing. So it was extremely relevant.
My gut is, because you want to build a LinkedIn audience, you're working on building a LinkedIn audience, you're already in that process. If he had been a little nervous, if he had stumbled a few times, even if he had forgotten his place and said, I can't remember what I was about to say, let's just go on to the next slide. Because you're trying to build an audience, and because he was offering something so valuable in that talk, my guess is that still would have been your favorite talk at the event, even if the delivery wasn't great. I had a client who gave a talk at a marketing conference about how to start a solo marketing business. Wow. It's a room full of marketers. Half of them want to start a solo marketing business. And she was nervous. I think she would say she was nervous. At one point, she blanked out and just said, guys, I'm so nervous. I can't remember what I'm supposed to say next. And she finished the talk, and, this might have even been part of why, which there's a little bit of a lesson there, but she got a standing ovation. Wow. And so many people ran with the content and ran with the ideas and started building stuff. And now she's like coaching people on how to build solo marketing businesses because she gave them something that actually offered real value to their lives, to their journeys, all that sort of thing. So that to me is the definition of a good talk, is exactly what you said. When people walk away, they go, I can do something with this. This is going to change the way I think. This is going to change the way I work. This is going to change the way I live. This is going to change the way I do relationships or whatever. If it will actually affect people in their day-to-day lives, to me, that is a good talk. That's the basic definition. And all the delivery stuff is so secondary to that sort of thing.
I love that. Now that we know what a great talk is to you, can you maybe start walking us through your framework for giving these amazing talks?
100%. Yes. And I'll try to tailor this. It might even be most helpful. Do you think you have a talk you'll give in the next year? Will you give another Notion one, or?
Those are more about like going through a template. So like breaking down how a template is built and how people can apply it in their personal lives or professional lives. I guess I could talk about being a founding marketer and prioritizing. I can imagine giving a talk about it, just about this topic, because it's so complex, how to grow multiple channels at once.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Being a founding marketer and trying to grow multiple channels at once. I love that. But let me start more high level and we can go from there. But basically, the foundation to me of a good talk starts with thinking of one real person. One of the things that often happens when you are asked to give a talk is you picture the crowd, and your brain just sort of says, what does a crowd need to hear? What does this group of people need to hear? Nobody can actually think creatively about what a group of people needs to hear. we can only think of what one person needs to hear. So you try to start with what is one real person who may or may not even be at the event, but they're the kind of person who would probably be at the event. And the better you know the person, the better. So for you, it would be thinking of somebody who's a founding marketer or wants to be a founding marketer and is trying to grow multiple channels. You picture that real person in your head, and you picture going on a walk with that person, or going to a restaurant, or if you drink beer, going to get a beer, going to get a coffee, whatever. And they ask you face to face, eyeball to eyeball, what do I need to know to do this well? What would you tell that real living, breathing human being? That is what grounds the talk in reality. That's what helps it actually be the most high value information, rather than just like, well, what should be said at a talk? Or a lot of a very common pitfall that people get into is they feel like they have to say all of the best practices to prove that they know what they're talking about. So they'll have 5 points, and 4 of them will be sort of the stuff that everybody knows, but they feel like they have to say to prove that they're like good at their job. I tell people, cut all that. Cut all that. What would you actually say to a real person who's wrestling with this thing? That is step one, is to just brain dump. What would you tell that real person? And then you really force yourself to filter it down to 2 or 3 maximum. I tried to get people to do 1-point talks. I have yet to succeed in the tech world. I'm always like, let's focus on one main thing, because people can really, really only internalize one thing at a time. So if you got them for 30 minutes, I'm like, let's just focus on one thing. But if you want to do 2 or 3, fine, do 2 or 3. The next step is to get those 2 or 3 things into sort of a template. So I like using music metaphors just because I used to be a musician, and you sing also. So there you go. So you know, like a pop song goes verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. That's not what you do with speaking, but speaking works the same way, in the sense that there's a sort of natural flow of how people expect information, especially spoken information, to go. So that template that I use with my clients is tension, trust building, teaching, takeaway. 4 T's. Tension, trust building, teaching, takeaway. The teaching section is the third section. You write that first, but it's not the first thing you talk about. The teaching section is those 2 or 3 things you want to explain to the audience. But when you're actually delivering, you start with tension building, and you build tension that the rest of the talk is going to resolve. So for your founding marketer example, let's say you have 2 or 3 pieces of advice you're going to give them. Give me one of them.
Talking to your audience to figure out where they actually spend their time.
I love it. So let's say your whole talk is going to be based on that one point. So at the top, in your tension section, you're setting up the tension that point is going to resolve. There are different ways to build tension. One of them is to start with a pain point. Maybe you say, hey, are you trying to build your marketing business and you're trying to manage 6 channels and none of them are working very well, and you're struggling trying to figure it out? That's one potential pain point. Another way to hit it would be what I would call like a knowledge gap. Depending on your audience, you might say most of you know you should focus on one channel, but you don't know how to pick the channel. And some of you have picked the wrong channel. That's like a knowledge gap. It's another way to build tension, right? All right, so the pain point is a way to build tension. A knowledge gap is a way to build tension. Another way is to just sort of make a big promise that your talk will fulfill. So you would say, hey, I just want you to know that, I recently worked with a client and they chose one channel and they went from X to Y in this amount of time, and they were here before, and you sort of say, hey, I want to help you see the same thing happen in your business. So at the beginning, all you're doing is setting up tension. All you're doing is saying, here is what is in it for you to listen to me talk for the next 30 minutes. That has to happen the first thing out of your mouth. I mean, you can say, hi, my name is Maria, and here's what I do. That's fine. That's fine. You can, just because otherwise, like, who is this person? But the very next thing needs to be helping people know what is in it for them, or they will start to completely check out. you get up there as a stranger, right? So it's like if a stranger walks up to you in a coffee shop and they're like, hey, did you see this news article? You're like, who are you and why are you talking to me, right? That's that same kind of thing happens when we get on stage. So first section is tension. Then second section is trust building. And this is where before you start telling them what to do, you need to help them understand why they should trust you. And the best way usually to do that is to talk about your own failures with that pain point. So you already have all this authority because you're on stage with a microphone. The way to build trust is to say, I've walked in your shoes. I've made the same mistakes many of you are making. So did you have for yourself a time where you had to learn that lesson about, was there some failure or trial and error in your own journey on that topic?
I mean, I guess it's always kind of there because you, from management or from just other marketers to being on every channel, you feel a bit pressure to, try new channels, try new things, and be more active on more channels to reach more people in theory and be successful on more channels. But then when I really started like focusing on LinkedIn as a primary channel, because we noticed also the clients are there and we are getting leads from this channel. When I started noticing first traction, we doubled down on LinkedIn. We grew our LinkedIn, and now it's one of our primary lead generation channels. So kind of clients are coming through this channel. Focus on one, you succeed on one, you master one, and then you can expand to more. But it's really important to not spread yourself too thin, right? To try to grow everything at once, because you will probably fail. It's just not possible. Also with a small team, which most marketing teams are too small.
So if you were to give a talk and share that story, what I would encourage you to do would be to spend 90% of the story in this trust building section talking about all of the frustration before you pivoted to focusing on LinkedIn. Yeah. So I mean, I'm assuming, maybe it was like, YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or Reddit or Twitter, right? Talk about how hard it was trying to manage those channels. Talk about what didn't work. Talk about how hard it was to get leads, and spend 90%, maybe 95% of this second section talking about the pain and frustration, because one, that helps level the playing field so it doesn't feel like you're talking on high to everyone. You put yourself in their shoes. You help them know you're not looking down on them. You help them know you've been there. And you're also building trust because you're saying, what I'm teaching you isn't something that was developed in a laboratory. In theory, this is what I actually did when I was stuck in the very same place that you were. So tension, trust building, teaching, that's where you actually give your 2 or 3 points, and we'll go back to that in a second. And then at the end, takeaway. Some kind of practical, go do this thing, try this thing. Here is the tool to figure out which channel is the right channel for you in your example. Here are 3 questions. Go and ask these questions with your team. The answers to these questions will lead you to the right channel. So some kind of practical takeaway.
I love having this framework to kind of refer to when I'm going to be planning my talk. Let's see what the topic is going to actually be. But it's so great to have a framework and not have to Google for one last minute, like I'm sure most marketers would do, and if they had not listened to this podcast. So I'm sure they will know now what to do. For the last few takeaways, any tips for like how long should it be? Is it like very short, like just these are the tools, like 1, 2 things, and then okay, have a good day, bye? Or
a few tools, hitting them quick can be great. Sometimes that's a great way to wrap it up. Another great way to wrap up that sort of takeaway section is to tell one more story about someone who used the teaching points you just gave and found success, and someone who isn't you. Because if you end with, hey, we did this and now we're killing it, well, it kind of makes it feeling about you, and it leaves people wondering, maybe this just works for Maria because Maria and her team are very gifted. Maybe they just stumbled into this thing that's working for them, but is it going to work for me? So if you can close with a story about somebody else that helps to really even add more believability at the end.
For giving the actual presentation, slightly moving to a different topic, but you mentioned stage fright for a second, and I think that's definitely a very huge thing for people. You said, like, if you focus on the content, you practice, and you have a framework, the nerves will subside.
That basic 4-part framework is a huge, not just that one, any sort of framework that gets your own thoughts clear in your mind takes away a certain amount of the stage fright. Taking the content even the next layer down, where you have planned out some punchy one-liners, you've written some stories, some analogies that drive the points home, you've got all your examples planned out, that takes away another big layer. And we probably don't have to go into all those details now, but there's sort of one layer down in um, the framework that I use with clients to build it out even more. Because if you have a 25-minute or 30-minute talk, you got to get one layer deeper. You can't just go with 4 big things and then just make up the rest on the fly. So there's like deeper things you can do to plan out the content. But once you have content that you feel great about, and you're like, I love this talk. I love each part. It makes perfect sense in my mind. Then the next biggest thing you can do to remove stage fright is to just practice it a bunch of times.
What everyone wants to hear, right?
Right?
Yeah,
And
you need to practice.
yeah, right.
It's correct.
Right. Again, I always go back to content. If you don't nail the content, practicing a bunch of times will only make you more nervous. Because every practice rep, you go, this is not good, but I don't know what to do. And so you just feel more nervous when you're done. And this still happens to me. This is funny timing. I have to make a bunch of tweaks to my talk for tomorrow because I practiced it yesterday or Thursday. And I was like, I finished practicing and I felt worse because it's not, the content is not there, right? The content needs to get stronger. But once the content is there, practicing will lower the nerves and it will lower the stress. Another thing you can do as you practice is to videotape yourself. That can backfire, but if you really are like, I want to make sure I'm doing this well, you can videotape yourself and watch the video back. That's really the only amount of like delivery advice I would encourage people to do, new communicators, because if you try, again, if you try to control all these facial expressions and hand motions and how much you walk, you end up just making yourself nuts. But if you record yourself, you watch it one time, you go, okay, here are a few things I want to do differently that can also help you feel more confident. Generally, if the content is there, the more you practice, the less nervous you are. 10 times is not too much. 15 times is not too much, especially if you really want to crush it.
I'm very curious, how do you feel about speaking and holding something, like holding some bullet points or notes? Do you completely do you say like, no, like practice enough so you don't have to use that? Or does it help in some cases or not? Like,
Just a great question. Generally, if you have a framework that makes sense to you, tension, trust building, teaching, takeaway. And if you have the detail of that built out in a logical way, meaning if you have some one-liners that you want to say, if those are on the screen, and if you have a story you want to tell, and you have some kind of visual to set up the story, and if you have some examples, and you have something visual on the screen to cue up the examples, what ends up happening is that what you would put on a phone or a piece of paper or an iPad is actually what is on the screen. So it's kind of like you don't need notes, not because you're just brilliant and don't need notes, but because what would be your notes are on the screen just in a way that serves the audience as well. That's what I do with my clients is we get it real linear, real clear, and then they put it on the screen and then they're good to go. And people think, wow, you're not using notes. And that's kind of true, but it's just kind of that they wrote a really clear talk and then put enough cues on the screen that they can cruise through it.
Coming towards the end of our interview, can you share a success story from one of your clients that is a personal highlight to you?
Yeah, 100%. So I'll share a little bit. This will be another sort of like thing that I'm passionate about, but a lot of the people I work with are consultants, founders, solopreneurs who are hoping on some level to land some clients from the talk, generate some business, generate some revenue from the talk. So the biggest win for me is always when they can do that, but it doesn't feel like they were giving a sales pitch. So what we try to do is for people in that boat, which is not everyone, but it's a lot of them, for people in that boat, we try to have them go into the talk with the goal of I am only here to serve this audience. I'm going to give them my absolute best stuff for free. The things I would normally say in a coaching call, the things I would normally have beyond a paywall, the things I would normally charge for one-on-one, I'm going to give away all those things in the talk for free. So one example, I think it should be fine with me sharing this, but Tass Bober, she does paid ads, landing pages, consulting for companies. It's a very niche thing, right? But she has all these frameworks that she takes her clients through, and she gave literally every single one of those frameworks for free in the talk to a room full of marketers. And to the point that they could have, and I'm guessing a lot of them did, go run with what she taught them, never call her, never pay her, never hire her. The cool part about even that is that they will sing her praises. They will talk about her all sorts of different places, and they will win as people. And it always feels good to help people win. But what also happened was a bunch of the people heard what she taught them and said, that makes sense. We know for sure now that you really know what you're doing, and we want to hire you. Nick actually says, Nick Brokema says this, that free information leads to paid implementation. And you've probably heard that before in the marketing world. So you give away your best stuff, and then that is how you build trust. That is how you build relationship. That's how you build authority. And then people will hire you to help them execute and help do it at a higher level than what they could do on their own. So for Tass, she gave this talk. She gave everything away. She was entertaining and funny and amazing. And she made a bunch of money afterward, even though the talk was unpaid. She didn't get paid $1 for giving the talk, but she made a ton of money from clients and consulting work that came out of it. So that's always the biggest win for me. You know, obviously I charge my clients, but I'm always like, okay, I'm shooting for 10x or 20x. What you pay me is what I hope you make out of this event. So that was a recent win. And that's, you know, been typical for clients I work with, is that because we take that framework of serving the audience, adding value, they generally get a lot of work. If that's what they're shooting for, they get a lot of work on the back end.
But this concept of, you know, you give for free, and then you give all of your knowledge for free, and then people come for the implementation. I think it took me a while to understand this concept, but now as a marketer, working in marketing also, I 100% stand behind that. People know what they need to do. They just need help doing it. The execution part is the hard part. We have so much knowledge. It's really just doing it.
Yes, I love that. Yep, so true.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge. It was super actionable. So I love that you also gave me an example that I can also implement in my own life. And I think it's always helpful to, you know, have a very clear example, even like on the spot. Where can our listeners connect with you and also learn more about your services if they need any support?
Yeah. LinkedIn is the best place. I have a website that's getting redone right now. And sometimes I'm like, does a website even really help? You know, everyone just goes straight to the LinkedIn DMs anyway. So yeah, LinkedIn's the best place. I'm there constantly posting and messaging with people. So yeah.
Amazing. Then people can reach out there. I'm super, super grateful for the opportunity and for you sharing all of this with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was great being here, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you on stage.
Thank you. I'll let you know. I'll let you know if that happens when it happens. Thank you.